In June 2020, just a few months after the global outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, collaborated with French economist Thierry Malleret to publish the book The Great Reset: After the Pandemic, Shaping a Better Future. In the book, they stated, "Tragedy need not be the only legacy of the COVID-19 crisis. On the contrary, the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world to create a healthier, more equitable, and more prosperous future." Upon its publication, the book stirred significant controversy as the concepts it presented, such as digital transformation, universal tracking, escalating social inequality, intensifying geopolitical risks, carbon reduction, and the resurgence of big government, now appear eerily prophetic. Some even perceive the Great Reset as a strategic move by an elite group. Why has a global restructuring plan become the subject of conspiracy theories? Today, let's delve into the unsettling realm of the Great Reset that prompts careful consideration. In January 2020, then Prince Charles III delivered a speech at the Davos Forum, expressing that climate change and the loss of biodiversity were the greatest threats facing humanity. To address these threats, he emphasized the need to reconstruct a new, sustainable economic order.
We have an incredible opportunity to create entirely new sustainable industries.
A few days after the conference, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 pandemic a public health emergency of international concern. In June of the same year, Klaus Schwab and Thierry Malleret jointly authored the book The Great Reset, which asserted that the COVID-19 pandemic could be a pivotal moment in modern society, exerting lasting and profound impacts on the world. First, the pandemic would exacerbate social inequality, making the poor poorer and the rich richer, a prediction validated by Schwab and Malleret. According to Oxfam's 2022 Inequality Kills report, over the past 2 years of the pandemic, the wealth of the world's richest 10 individuals doubled, while 160 million people fell into extreme poverty, revealing economic violence tearing the world apart. The pandemic highlighted the profound disconnect between the intrinsic value of certain occupations, such as those caring for the sick and maintaining essential societal functions, and their economic rewards. The affluent and the middle class could engage in remote work, while the working class found themselves on the front lines. One severe consequence of escalating inequality is social unrest, as people, devoid of jobs, income, and hope for a better life, may resort to violence. Schwab and Malleret proposed a solution to post-pandemic social unrest: the return of big government. They argued that big government, colloquially meaning a government capable of actively intervening in all social and economic issues, is necessary. The authors believed that the lessons from the past 500 years indicate that severe crises strengthen the power of the state. In the future, nations must permanently enhance the responsibilities and roles of governments to address mass unemployment and economic insecurity. The authors also posited that the pandemic intensified geopolitical uncertainty. They foresaw the end of an era dominated by a single superpower, predicting a chaotic redistribution of power and influence. The ongoing conflicts, such as the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Palestine conflict, seem to validate these predictions. Schwab and Malleret emphasized in their book that most threats to human survival and development, whether pandemics, climate change, or terrorism, are all global issues requiring collaborative efforts among nations. Without a global strategic governance framework, sustained recovery for the world is unlikely. In addition to that, the pandemic accelerated global digitization. All of a sudden, activities such as going to the cinema, restaurants, coffee shops, gyms, and shopping malls became inaccessible. Work, education, shopping, entertainment, and even healthcare were forced into digitalization. Some entrenched habits were slowly replaced, and even after the pandemic, this digital transformation is likely to persist. For example, several technology companies continue to adopt remote work models 3 years after the major COVID outbreak. The pandemic also gave rise to a new term, digital tracking. Today, an estimated 5.2 billion smartphones worldwide can be used to track infected individuals, close contacts, and locations of infection. During the pandemic, various surveys conducted in the United States and Europe have indicated that an increasing number of citizens support public institutions tracking their smartphones within specific limits. However, the book does not specify the sources of these survey data. Schwab and Malaret praise the digital tracking measures implemented in China, South Korea, Singapore, and other countries, stating that such tracking effectively controls the spread of pandemics. Especially the Trace Together program operated by the Singapore Ministry of Health seems to perfectly balance pandemic control and protection of citizens' privacy. It keeps user data on the phone instead of servers and implements anonymous logins. Both authors predicted that, even in the post-pandemic era, government and corporate surveillance of the public would to some extent be retained. Schwab and Malaret emphasized that the global pandemic offered a glimpse or an early experience of how comprehensive climate crises and ecosystem collapses could impact the functioning of economies and societies. To reconstruct a sustainable economic order in the post-pandemic era, carbon reduction is of utmost importance. We will look further into this carbon reduction topic in a minute. The authors suggest the pandemic presents a crucial choice for humanity. One path leads to a more inclusive and respectful world, while the other returns to a crisis-filled reality. They emphasize the need for the right choice, urging all countries and industries to actively participate in the Great Reset, including transformation in sectors from oil and gas to high-tech. Advocates of the Great Reset plan include Prince Charles III of the United Kingdom, Gina Gopinath, Chief Economist of the IMF, Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and many leaders of major corporations, including Microsoft. The question remains, is the reconstructed future world as promising as Schwab and Malaret suggest? On the cover of the Great Reset's Chinese edition shows an image of a Rubik's Cube being twisted and reshaped, seemingly suggesting the future of the world. The first issue that catches people's attention is its publication time. The Great Reset was published in June 2020, just as the global spread of the COVID-19 pandemic was becoming apparent. In March 2020, the United States had just started implementing lockdown measures. Typically, the publication of a book takes several months or even years, not to mention the time spent on conceptualizing and writing the book. This raises the question of whether Klaus Schwab and Thierry Malaret rapidly conceived a comprehensive plan to reconstruct society in the few months after the pandemic outbreak, or had been contemplating the content of this book well in advance. In fact, the concept of the Great Reset was initially proposed by American economist Richard Florida in 2010, aiming to establish a more resilient green economic environment. However, it was Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, who breathed life into the Great Reset. Thierry Malaret, the co-author of the book, also works for the World Economic Forum, founding the Global Risk Network team and serving as the team's director. Now, we have to dig deeper into the background of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum behind him. Klaus Schwab was born in Ravensburg, Germany in 1938. His father, Eugen Wilhelm Schwab, was the managing director of Escher Wyss, a Swiss industrial company that supplied weapons to the Nazi regime during World War II. After the war, Klaus Schwab and his parents immigrated to Switzerland. Due to a privileged upbringing, he received elite education, studying at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology Zurich, the University of Fribourg, and later pursuing further studies at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School with a doctorate in mechanical engineering, a doctorate in economics, and a master's degree in public administration. In the early 1970s, Schwab was invited to be a professor at the University of Geneva. In 1971, he founded the European Management Forum, which later became the World Economic Forum in 1987. According to the World Economic Forum's official website, they are a non-profit foundation, independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interests, prioritizing global public interest, moral, and intellectual integrity at the core of their corporate spirit. Despite this appealing ideology, the World Economic Forum is, in reality, the world's largest lobbying organization, bringing together giants and elites from various industries. According to Wikipedia, the operational funding of the World Economic Forum mainly comes from its over 1,000 corporate members, multinational companies with annual turnovers exceeding $5 billion. In addition to corporate members, the WEF has thousands of individual members, leaders from business, politics, academia, media, technology, and the arts. Figures like now King Charles, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Bono serve as spokespeople for the World Economic Forum. Membership requires hefty fees, with individual member annual fees reaching $52,000 in 2011, corporate member fees at $263,000, and strategic partner member fees an astounding $527,000. It's likely that these fees have only increased over time. While Klaus Schwab is not elected as a leader by anyone, he is, in a sense, one of the most influential individuals globally. In 2016, Danish politician Ida Auken published an article titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." Ida Auken, a former Danish Minister of the Environment, was nominated by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader. In her vision of the future, everything is digitized and individuals own nothing. People have no private cars, no houses, not even household appliances. All possessions are available for free use, and the concept of ownership loses its meaning. While some may enjoy improved lifestyles with more time for good food, good sleep, and family, the lack of privacy becomes a concern. Auken notes, "There was a time in the early days of the transition where I felt a bit like I was living in a goldfish bowl. Everything I did and every purchase I made was tracked and under surveillance. I could only hope that no one would misuse the information against me." This article, in conjunction with Schwab's propositions in The Great Reset, particularly the call for accelerating digital transformation, has understandably unsettled many. The thought experiment presented involves the government mandating that all citizens wear biometric tracking devices 24/7, measuring body temperature and heart rate. While the data obtained could assist citizens in preventing major illnesses and significantly reduce the risk of sudden death, the article raises concerns about the potential implications. The use of biometric tracking devices for a new surveillance system could legitimize intrusive monitoring. For instance, if regulatory authorities knew you were watching a short video or reading a news article, they could analyze your body temperature, blood pressure, and heart rate to determine your current emotions, whether you're joyful, sad, fearful, or angry. This could lead to speculations about your personal preferences and personality traits, allowing others to understand and even manipulate your feelings. No wonder privacy advocates warn against letting the pandemic become a watershed moment in surveillance history. Schwab's call in The Great Reset to actively reform current capitalism, making it more aligned with the interests of all stakeholders, is also discussed. This involves advocating for stakeholder capitalism, where businesses' fundamental goals go beyond unrestrained profit pursuit to serve not only shareholders, but all stakeholders, including customers, employees, suppliers, local communities, and even society as a whole. However, stakeholder capitalism may be more applicable to large corporations, and for small and medium-sized enterprises, survival may be the top priority. Many small businesses struggle to turn a profit, let alone pursue societal welfare on top of that. According to the 2014 data from the United States Census Bureau, 51% of small businesses have a lifespan of less than 10 years, and 32% of them have a lifespan of less than 5 years. In recent years, the turbulent social environment and international trends have made the operation of small and medium-sized enterprises even more challenging. The mass closure of SMEs could potentially increase industry monopolies, with industry giants being the perpetual beneficiaries. Regarding the controversy over carbon reduction, in August 2020, a few months after the publication of The Great Reset, Bill Gates, a member of the World Economic Forum, stated in an interview that climate change could be worse than the COVID-19 pandemic. He predicted that by 2060, climate change could be as deadly as the coronavirus, and by 2100, its lethality could be 5 times that of COVID-19. In February 2021, Gates published a book titled How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, focusing on the urgency of carbon reduction, aligning with Schwab's call in The Great Reset. Gates attributes global warming, especially climate change, to greenhouse gas emissions caused by human activities. He emphasizes the need to achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions, reducing the annual 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases emitted by humans to zero, a challenging task. According to the International Energy Agency's 2020 Global CO2 Emissions Report, global energy-related CO2 emissions decreased by 5.8% in 2020, marking the largest annual decline since World War II. Despite the global lockdown, remote work, and economic standstill in 2020, CO2 emissions only decreased by 5.8%. Achieving zero emissions with the current energy structure would be extremely difficult. Therefore, Schwab proposes a thorough, systemic transformation of energy production and consumption behaviors, advocating for achieving zero emissions through carbon neutrality. This involves using renewable energy, recyclable materials, afforestation, carbon capture, and other methods to absorb emitted carbon, achieving a balance of positive and negative emissions. Before embarking on such endeavors, it's essential to consider whether global warming is genuinely caused by human activities. In 2017, environmental scientist W. Jackson Davis published a paper titled The Relationship Between Atmospheric Carbon Dioxide Concentration and Global Temperature for the Last 425 Million Years. The paper analyzed over 425 million years of data and found that, over an extended timeline, there seems to be no significant correlation between carbon dioxide concentration and global temperature. Particularly, during the period between 225 million and 200 million years ago, carbon dioxide concentrations peaked, but temperatures showed an overall declining trend. While human activities have undoubtedly led to environmental pollution and substantial emissions of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane since the Industrial Revolution, the direct causal relationship between human activity and global warming remains debated in the scientific community. Why then do mainstream media and politicians forcefully link these two issues without a clear scientific consensus? In 2022, Alibaba Group President Michael Evans made a significant statement at the Davos Forum. He mentioned that Alibaba is developing software to track people's carbon footprints, recording details of what individuals eat, purchase, places visited, and modes of transportation used.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
In the foreseeable future, countries are expected to allocate quotas for carbon emissions. Countries that exhaust their quotas can purchase carbon emission rights from countries where quotas are still abundant. It is foreseeable that, until non-carbon energy becomes the primary energy source, developing countries that emphasize industrial development will inevitably emit more carbon. Consequently, their economic lifelines will be firmly controlled by developed countries that have already achieved carbon neutrality. For businesses, there will be a requirement to pay carbon emission taxes. Individuals may find a new expense in their daily bills: carbon emission fees. Combining big data, biometric tracking technology, and the recent efforts by the World Economic Forum and central banks of many countries to promote central bank digital currencies, it appears that everyone will become a digital entity in the future, tightly monitored by various technologies. Central bank digital currencies differ from decentralized cryptocurrencies. Central bank digital currencies are indeed more secure and less volatile, but they are fundamentally centralized currencies controlled by national central banks. If an individual's social credit score, for instance, is too low due to excessive carbon emissions or perceived unethical behavior, authorities can easily impose sanctions by freezing their digital currency or restricting their mobility. The future world described by Danish politician Ida Auken, where everyone has nothing, might be on its way. After these discussions, it's clear why many find the World Economic Forum's Great Reset plan a formidable challenge. The non-profit organization Winter Oak has criticized it for potential elements of extreme fascism. Some conspiracy theorists view it as part of an evil plan controlled by elite groups, Freemasons, and lizard people. Putting aside baseless conspiracies, the controversies around the Great Reset reflect power struggles among different groups. The book, The Great Reset, mentions various measures for restructuring the future world, such as global digital governance, a world carbon emission trading system, global cooperation, etc., all of which exhibit a strong inclination towards globalism. In fact, the World Economic Forum is an international organization that gathers globalist elites. Globalism and globalization are somewhat different. Globalization often refers to economic aspects, while globalism is an ideology. Corresponding to globalism is anti-globalism or nationalism. Anti-globalists oppose the globalization process for various reasons. Some believe that globalization widens the wealth gap. Others argue that, during globalization, developed countries' governments collaborate with multinational corporations to exploit international division of labor through loans and debts, promoting forms of neo-colonialism, including financial and technological colonization. Developed countries might also transfer environmental crises to developing countries, disrupting their ecological balance. For developed countries, globalization also brings disadvantages such as reducing domestic employment opportunities and causing industrial hollowing. In recent years, waves of anti-globalism have surged. In November 1995, a massive protest erupted in Seattle, USA, opposing the World Trade Organization and its policies of trade liberalization. In April 2000, over 20,000 union members, labor organization members, and environmentalists formed a protest march in Washington, USA, against the World Bank and the IMF. In September of the same year, Melbourne, Australia, witnessed protests against the World Economic Forum. These events indicate the rise of a force counteracting globalism. Former U.S. President Trump is considered an anti-globalist. In 2019, he expressed the view at the United Nations General Assembly that the future does not belong to globalists, the future belongs to patriots.
The future belongs to sovereign and independent nations who protect their citizens, respect their neighbors, and honor the differences that make each country special and unique.
The controversy surrounding the Great Reset essentially revolves around two ideologies, globalism and anti-globalism, or the power struggle between these two forces. However, based on the current situation, globalism seems to be gaining the upper hand. Whether one is willing to accept it or not, the implementation of the Great Reset plan appears to be proceeding methodically. In 2016, the World Economic Forum released a short video announcing 8 predictions about the future. These predictions are: 1. All products will be sold as services. 2. There will no longer be a single superpower. 3. Organ printing technology will become a reality. 4. People will eat less or no meat. 5. People will be more tolerant and accepting of refugees. 6. A global carbon pricing mechanism will be launched. 7. Landing on Mars will no longer be a dream. 8. Western values will continue to be tested. It's not difficult to see that these predictions resonate with the envisioned New World Order of the Great Reset. Whether the future world will develop as predicted by the World Economic Forum and what role anti-globalists will play in the execution of the Great Reset plan remains to be seen.